So welcome everyone to this session about superpowers of the Oracle database. My name is Philipp Salvisberg. I work for Trivadis in Switzerland, and I'm mainly engaged in Oracle database related architectures, not only in the database itself. I do a lot of stuff within Java outside of the database, but I try to use the database as efficient as possible. So you find me also on social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn. I have also a blog. On the blog, you find also the slides for this talk. The slides are more complete than what I will show here, because I plan to show some demos, and they are incorporated in the slides a bit differently. So let's get started. This is a kind of agenda, and I'm a big fan of the Justice League, and especially of the Snyder Cut, of Snyder's Cut. It's really a different movie, and I recommend to everyone who hasn't watched it yet to do that. It's a 4 hours movie, but nowadays where we are used to stream whole shows, that shouldn't be really a problem. I recommend it, and what I plan to do is to associate a feature of each of these superheroes with a feature of the Oracle database. And one person is missing here, and I will come to that person at the end. So let's get started with Bruce Wayne, alias Batman. So you see here a scene in the movie, and at that point, Barry Allen asks Bruce Wayne, so what are your superpowers again? And Bruce Wayne answers quite cool, I'm rich. And that's the association with the Oracle database, because the Oracle database is also rich in features, in functionality. And you see that when you look at the documentation. The documentation is really huge. It contains 164 books, and this is just the index, the complete index here on the left side with all 164 books. Most of them are available in PDF. All of them are available as HTML version. And when you download them, that's possible too, you get about 6 GB documentation. And the documentation is nowadays really good. Of course, every documentation has its flaws, but nowadays it's really good, and you should have a look at it. And one document I really want to mention here are the database concepts. It's nothing new. A lot of people mentions the database concept, and the database concept is written in a style where you can read it cover to cover. I personally haven't done that, but it's possible. What I do from time to time, especially when major releases come out, I scan it and go through to see what's new. And sometimes I hang on sections where I learn something new, even if it is not a new feature. And here I want to point out two things. First of all of these books have an audience section where you can see who should read that. And in this case, it's also interesting for database application developers. So basically for everyone who is using SQL of the database. And there is one feature I picked out here, which is explaining how constraints checking work. And in this example, it's a silly example, of course, but all employees are updated. The emp ID is updated by 5,000, and the manage ID is also updated by 5,000. And there is a foreign key constraint defined for that. And you can imagine, there must be a problem when they are going into overlapping ranges. And here it is explained why it is not a problem, because the constraints are checked after a statement. So I see sometimes solution where people think that it is not possible to do something like this and do it differently. So it's sometimes really worth to have a look into the concepts. So that's for starters. Now we start with Diane Prince, alias the Wonder Woman. And one of her features is, her abilities, I should say, is she can talk, she understands every language, whether spoken or written, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it still exists, there's someone there who can speak it. And she can also talk to animals and then understand what animals say. So I envy her, because I'd like sometimes to also understand what my dog thinks or says or whatever. But what is the relation to the Oracle database? What can I associate with that? And this is talking to foreign systems. There are different ways to talk to foreign systems in the database. One, for example, you can talk to another Oracle database via database links. You can talk from the database, calling a REST service to other systems. Or another option is talk to another system via messaging. Advanced queuing is an example here. That's an example I shown at the DOAC conference 2017, showing that it is possible to emulate an on-commit trigger. And what I'm doing here in this application, basically, I want to, when I change the salary of an employee, I want that a message a tweet is going out with the announcement who has got a salary raise or something like that. It sounds silly as an example, but in reality, we have a lot of such processes where when we do something, something else is initiated. And why do we do that via advanced queuing in that using two queues here? Why we don't just call a REST API from this PL SQL trigger? There are several reasons. First, when I call here a REST API, then maybe when I do a rollback, then the call already happened. So I communicate something which did not happen to the database. So the action here is not transactional. So when I really need a transactional context, then I have to separate that. Oops. Then I have to separate that. And the other reason is that when I call this REST API, this takes time. So I prolong the transaction here to change just the salary. So it takes more time. And another disadvantage is that it's not possible to change the salary anymore when Twitter is not available. So my application here is depending on the availability of Twitter. Of course, I can handle that and ignore that error and don't send it, or what I do something else. But in the end, I have a problem here. So the easiest way to solve that is just to split that, do two jobs, two transactions. First one just saying, I've completed my transaction, and then having an application wherever it is, it can be also in the database itself, and listening to the changes in the queue and doing the stuff. Another advantage is there that I can better control the amount of work that is done. So if this is really a costly operation, if this really is a costly operation, then I might limit the number of parallel process, which is tweeting, something like that. And in the end, it is done. So you see, there are a lot of advantages when you do that. And the last advantage is here when I do advanced queuing, I have the possibility to define a record type which is understood by Java application. So I can use a JMS message style, and then from the Java application, it looks like you just install a driver and it works. It doesn't matter which queuing system you use. It's standardized from a Java point of view, and that's really cool. So I mentioned the most advantages here. One I didn't mention is the standardized interoperability. So I mentioned it a bit with JMS, but there are also possibilities to propagate messages between databases. So you can use advanced queuing to keep up another database which is not always available, and do stuff like that. And what's really cool, a new feature in 21, which is coming, are transactional event queues, which allows you to communicate in a standard way with Apache Kafka. So that's a new feature for production readiness, earliest, I think, 23, but it just shows that advanced queuing is not an old technology. It's keeping up with the new stuff, and it's worth to have a look. And it's for sure better to use advanced queuing instead of doing that stuff yourself. I've seen that at customer side. Hey, it's in the end just a simple table, insert, select, and delete. That's easy to handle. But in the end, when you complete your application, it's more. Good. The next guy we are looking at is Barry Allen, the Flash. And he's not only fast like a Flash, he has also the ability to travel in time when he's fast enough. He is not quite accurate to travel in time, but he has the capability. And so what is the associated feature in the Oracle database? I think you may guess it. It's flashback. Flashback query is one part of it. I show here an Apex example. I guess most of you are familiar with Apex, and in Apex there is a standard feature in every report you have where you can click on, in the right menu here, click on flashback, and then a pop-up window goes up, and you may enter the duration you want to see the data, how many minutes before now. So you can travel in time. And this works quite well, and the technology behind which is used here is the same as for read consistency. It just consumes the undo table space to get this data. This is exposed since Oracle 11 as an API, and this is used here. And what can happen, also how does it work in Apex? Apex just moves the whole query in a subquery in the inline view and adds a clause with as of timestamp and calculates the timestamp, how many minutes to go back. So that's how it is implemented, just with a simple clause in Apex. But what happens when I go back, let's say 4 hours or 2 days or something like that? Then it may happen that this information is not available in the undo anymore, and I get an error like this: no snapshot found. So the data is not available anymore. And to overcome this, there is a feature. I show that as a demo. There is a feature in the database that is called Flashback Data Archive, or Flashback Archive. And what you can do here is, typically the DBA creates that for you, a flashback archive that is based on a table space, and you say that you want to keep the data 1 year. So what happens here, when you have intervals which are closed and older than a year, then the background jobs of flashback archive will delete them. So I have automatically housekeeping included. And when I do here an example and I create the table, I create here a table and I insert also some data here with 2 records, an insert and an update with a delay of 6 seconds. And I ask here immediately, do a query. What was the state 30 minutes ago? I do get an error message, and 25 minutes ago, I get an error message 25 seconds ago also. Now it is empty, and now it is still empty. And now there is the first version, which is really visible. And when I rerun the query, now I see the last version is really visible here. So I have the ability automatically to historize my data. And this works for a longer time than that's what's available in the undo table space. But from the syntax here, it's flashback query and flashback data archive looks 100% the same. You just, when the data is not available in the undo, it tries to get the data from the undo. When it's not available there, it uses the data in the flashback archive. Another way to query the data is to get all versions, like I've done that here. So I just say SCN min and max value. So I get all information here. I see when a version started and ended with SCN, which is the sequence of the database. This sequence of the database is translated to the real time, but you cannot guess the time. The gap between SCNs doesn't say anything about the real time. So it really depends on the number of transactions you are doing, what it means. So there is also stored in the database a mapping table, what it means. So you see here the translation here, the 6 seconds difference I created here. And you see the first operation and the update afterwards, the updated record. So I could try now to clean up my data, but this will not work because this feature, of course, behaves a bit differently. And that's also a reason a lot of people don't like it, because it really behaves differently. What happens behind the scene, I should see it here. Yes, there are additional tables created. These are the flashback archive tables. This number here is the object ID of this table. And when I can query this data, and it's interesting because I see here the column names, and I see that the column names were established at that date and are never terminated. So you have also the ability to modify the structure, and Flashback Archive is able to cope with that. And we have here the history table. The history table is just one record there, the old record with the value B. And we have transaction log information here for the current data. I see the current row was inserted at that point of time, then terminated because there was an update. So that's the information here in these tables. And as long as these tables exist, they are coupled with this table there. It's not possible just to drop them. What you can do, just say, I don't want that archive anymore. So I say alter table, no flashback archive. And when I requery here the tables, they are gone. Now I'm able to drop this table, drop the flashback archive, and we're good. So that was flashback query. So the next person here I'm presenting is Victor Stone. Victor Stone had a really bad accident when he was young, and usually he would have died, but his father used alien technology and made him a cyborg. And based on this alien technology, he has a lot of capabilities. He can fly, and he can also morph his arm into a shield. And this shield is that strong that it withholds the vision of Superman, the heat vision of Superman. So it's really strong. And what is the association with a shield in the Oracle database? It's the virtual private database. So you all know that you can grant access to a table or grant access to a view, but that's just the access for the whole content, for all the rows of the table. If you want to limit the access a bit more granular on rows or columns or combinations of columns, then you may use virtual private database for that functionality. And you basically just define a filter which will be applied for these statements: select, insert, update, delete, and merge. I show that also in an example. That's the second demo here. And the first thing I'm going to do here is create a predicate function. This predicate function takes two parameters. The first parameter is a schema name, and the second parameter is a table name. It doesn't matter how they are named, it's just the order is relevant here. And you can do whatever you want in the body. In the end, you just have to return a predicate. And the predicate you can think of is just a part of the where clause. It's combined with everything you have defined elsewhere, that in parentheses, and added with and your predicate. So that's what you're constructing here. And typically you can ask your environment, you can ask the roles which are available set by a context. In this case, I made it quite simple. I just ask which user I am. When I'm this user which I'm connected right now, then I will add a predicate which says job not in manager or president. So I should not see those rows in the emp table. But the association to the emp table, this is something I do here a bit later. Let me just create this function. And then I can add a policy. I say I want to add these policies to the emp table. I have to give the policy a name. It can be a policy which is more generic. It must not be only applicable to the emp table. And I define what's the policy function. That's the one I created here. That's the emp predicate here. And then I define the statements type which should be considered. So I can create the policy which is only applicable for delete or for select, insert, update, delete, like I've done it here. And what you also can do is to restrict the policy to a set of columns. The default is the whole row, but in this case, I just said, I chose two sensitive columns, cell and column. And I want that it is checked also when I do an update. So I create this policy here, and then I can query the Oracle dictionary and see also this information in the dictionary. And you see here the possibility, of course, it's possible to put that in a package, in a proper package, and manage it that way. And as I said, the associate, you can do a generic predicate function and apply it to several objects. An object can be a table or also a view. Good. So let's do a query now. I have here a query where I select basically all columns except the two protected ones, the salary and the commission. And the result you see here are 14 rows. When I query the explain plan for that query, I see nothing special. It's just the full table access, but no further information here in the node section or in the filter section. So let's do a query with select star from emp. What happens now? I just get 10 rows because I wanted to select all the commission and debt. No, the policy kicked in and restricted my result. So it's not possible to see them. So when I look at the display cursor again at the execution plan, then I get the additional information here that this filter was applied. It's also a possibility to return null instead of to hide the complete row, but then it's not possible to apply it on all statement types. Then you have to work probably with several policies. Okay, let's check also the number of rows. What happens when I do a select star, count star from emp? A count star means star is a placeholder for all columns. So it includes also the columns salary and commission. So from a mathematical point of view, it's correct to just return 10 rows. And as a consequence, it doesn't matter if you choose a constant here like 1, because this will be rewritten to select star and results also only in 10 rows. But when I select a column which is visible for me, like EMP-NO, which is not restricted, I get the result of 14 rows. So for all of those who thought that this would give for a not null column always the same result, you see there are cases where this is not true. So let's try to insert an additional employee here. I try to insert me with a salary and debt, no commission. I get an error because I tried to insert into access a restricted column, which is the salary, which is not possible. Let's try to do that without the salary. Then this works. So I do a rollback here. When I try to delete all EMPs, then this works also, but just for 10 rows for those jobs which I'm allowed to see. So as with the select count, only part of it will be applied. Update, you can imagine that when I do an update here of the salary, then it's possible to do that for the salary, but not for the filter I've applied. So only 10 rows. Works also for merge. You basically merge is select, insert, update, delete just in one statement. So this works as well. Good, so let's do a cleanup here that the other examples work afterwards. Delete that policy, and now when I'm selecting every columns, the 14 employees are visible. Good. So that's a virtual private database. But when I mention virtual private database, I have also to mention the newer functionality, which is called real application security. Real application security, it's a bit more complicated to grasp. Therefore, I chose virtual private database for that demo. But the advantage of real application security is that it is fully declarative, so you don't need to define predicate functions as I've done that before. But it needs a bit more time to grasp how it works. Good. So let's come to the next person, and this is Arthur Curry. Arthur Curry is half human and half Atlantean, but he's the strongest human on Earth, and he's the strongest Atlantean in the sea. So you see, it's not a disadvantage to be just half of something, or it's just more if you combine them. So that's some kind of a complicated way to hand over to the Oracle feature I'm comparing that to. And that's the converged database. The converged database combines also several things in one database. So it was always possible to store other data types in the Oracle database. A long time we have XML, we have JSON where we can store it. We can use analytics views to simulate cubes and access them via MDX from outside of the database. And of course we have spatial, and of course we have also graph in the database. And it's not a disadvantage to have everything in a single database. We have a lot of use cases where we can do everything in a single place. It's not necessary to extract all the data, do some fancy calculation or not so fancy calculation, and put it back in another store or in the same data store. I can do the stuff within the database, maybe choose only the part I want to process more intelligently, and then process everything within the database. So there are advantages with the converged database, and I will show you example here from a customer. It's based on spatial, and it's a Swiss customer, and in Switzerland we have, of course, our own coordinate system, of course, because we did a lot of such things in Switzerland for ourselves. And this coordinate system has some specialities. The 0 point here is not really a 0 point, it's 1,200,000 and 2,600,000 here is defined to be at the old observatory in Bern. It does not exist anymore. Nowadays, it's the Institute of Exact Scientists, and that's the 0 point, let's call it like that. And the speciality here is that the coordinates, or the X and Y coordinates, are chosen that it's not possible that the same value exists on X and Y. So it's always clear whether you're referring X and Y, it doesn't matter in which order. So that's an advantage. The other speciality is that these are the unit is meters. So when you have 2 points, it's easy to calculate or guess the distance between 2 points because the coordinates are in meters. And the third advantage of this is that Switzerland is providing the maps in this coordinate system for various scales for free. So you just can incorporate them for free in your application. So that's why it is also quite heavily used, this coordinate system. So here, for example, when I click on this link here, then it opens up this free map, and you see here the Institute of Science here, and in front here is the University of Bern, which is a bit, from my point of view, the nicer building. So let's look at an example. What can I do with spatial? With spatial, can I do a lot of things? I've just chosen here a small transformation feature, and one feature is, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's my dog is coming home. Just a moment. Okay, I'm back. So in this case, I just want to convert the coordinates which I have in this Swiss coordinate system to a more common coordinate system, which is called VGS 84, or which is used, you know it from the GPS system. And spatial provides here transformation functions where I can define, that's a point, that's 2056 is LB 95, and the target is 4326, VGS 84. Of course, there are some lookup tables for that, but the point is you can convert that quite easily. And the result is STO geometry, which has a new coordinate in the system, which is possible to show the information in Google Maps, or in this example, I want to show it in Google Earth. So I click on Google Earth. It will take some time to populate it. Exactly, and let's look at it from the standard view, north view, and I see here this Institute of Science, Exact Sciences, where the original point was, and I see also here the University of Bern, which is a quite nicer view than the standard view, which is available for free. Okay, so that gives you an idea what you can do with spatial, and you can imagine that you can do much more interesting stuff like calculating overlapping surfaces and something like that. Good. Let's go to the next superhero. I think all of you know them, Clark Kent, alias Superman, and he has a lot of capabilities. As long as not the kryptonite is involved, he's probably unbeatable. But what I want to mention here is his ability that he has also X-ray vision. So he can look through things. And the associated feature in the Oracle database is Oracle text. And maybe I say, hey, what Oracle text, how is the association there? Oracle text allows you to look into a document. So Oracle text, maybe you don't know it, but it understands Excel, and you can look into Excel and convert data within Excel and query the data there, or you can convert Word documents or Lotus documents, 1, 2, 3, if you have them, a lot of things like that. Nowadays, we use it typically for plain text or also for XML and JSON. And I will show you here an example as a demo. Okay, I'm connected right now to the cloud because I show you some 21 features, but most of the thing I show you here is available also in 90C. So what I do here first is I create a table based on the Oracle dictionary, and I limit the result to the Apex schema. So I get all the views which are defined in the Apex schema because they are quite well documented, and I store this information in a JSON document per view. So I just want to make sure that it is JSON, and then we do a quick query for an example. So I may click here on an example and see what I get here. It's a view name, I get the description, and I get here the list of columns with some attributes. It's not very spectacular, but just a small example. So what can I do right now? I can query this data using JSON SQL JSON functionality like that. It's very nice how it is solved compared to XML. Here the syntax are very much like it. It's quite condensed and readable from my point of view. And what I get here is I get the rows where the description in the JSON document contains jQuery. And I get 4 results, and somewhere here jQuery, there is jQuery, here's jQuery, and here's jQuery, so it looks accurate. When I look at the execution plan, and my comments say I should pin it, so I do that, then nothing special is here, just the full table access to that table. So it's really costly to read all this JSON globs. And then what I can create right now, and that's not the 21C feature, it's something which is available in 90C as well. But what does work only in 21 is that this kind of predicate also makes use of Oracle text. So I run the execution plan again, and now I see that there is an access to a domain index. The domain index is called JTabs search, and whoever had already worked with Oracle text, this xtext sys is the schema where the Oracle text is stored, and here is an access on the column description. So it's better access, a faster access, which is possible right when you use 21C this way. But what works already in 19C is when you just use something like JSON text contains. And in this case, I say I'd like to have all the views which contains jQuery with this expression. When I look right now at the execution plan, then I see something interesting, that only the domain index is accessed, no access to the tables because everything is there. And I have also Oracle text access here. So in the end, all this indexing features, you have a lot of them for XML and JSON, are based on Oracle text. And this allows you to combine, to have really a converged database. For some statics columns, you store them relational and have the other ones in a JSON document. And for some search capable columns, you may add indexes on them, and you have the best of both worlds. So it's really something nice. I hope you appreciate that as much as I do. Good, that was the example for the converged database. And now I come to the last person. It missed on the agenda slide, you probably remember. It's Alfred Pennyworth. And Alfred Pennyworth, alias the butler, probably, but he's not only the butler, he's also kind of a father for the small Bruce Wayne, because his parents have been killed when he was a child. So he raised him, and he's also kind of an engineer in the newest multiverse, where he's responsible for some good ideas and so on. But however, from my point of view, I always associate Alfred Pennyworth as a butler, and a butler, from my point of view, has always good manners. And what does that mean in our context? It's not specifically an Oracle feature. It's something. It's more targeting to the developers, how we behave, how we should behave, how we should show good manners. So one example in this category is that, from my point of view, is if we develop stuff right now, the source code belongs into a version control system. There are different ways how you store that stuff in the version control system. Nowadays, the version control system to use typically is Git. And I like this picture very much, because it shows that you have a remote side, and it also shows that you have a local side, that a whole lot of things goes on the local side before you finally push that stuff to the remote repository and make it visible for other developers. So you do the development locally, you develop your code locally, and typically this means also nowadays you have access to a personal database environment. This personal database environment might be a local one in Docker, this might be a central one, a PDB you have, but typically it's one which you do not share with other developers. So you can really do whatever you want. You have an easy way to restore it to a certain restore point, something like that. So that's essential from my point of view to end up with a file-based development. Good. When I have a file-based development, then from my point of view, it's also important to not just write code, to also ensure that this code works as it should. And how do you check that? You check that by testing it. And nowadays, we have really good testing framework for the Oracle database, and that's UTPL SQL. And you can install it in the Oracle database. It's just schema, it's no repository, so it's easy to upgrade. And it's integrated in several development environments. You can use it in SQL Developer, in PL SQL Developer, in Toad, in DataGrip. So, and there shouldn't be hinder you to use it really. The output of such a thing is, if you have file-based development, you can integrate it in a continuous integration environment, and that produces a report of your test results. And they are in JUnit format, and therefore it can be shown integrated in any CI environment. What's also interesting is that UTPL SQL is capable to provide some code coverage reports, and these code coverage reports can be shown in various tools, and one of them is SonarQube. And SonarQube has also the capability to check code also for good behavior, for good manners. And what is good, that brings me to code quality, and what code quality is a matter of definition. And we from Tribadis have defined some coding guidelines. And one interesting thing that Roger Trollo said here in the introduction, that code is more often read than written. And therefore, I should make sure that it's easy to understand. And in most cases, the author is the one who is reading that code again. And it happens from time to time. If you read your code after a few weeks, few months or years, you think, what the fuck have I thought when I wrote that stuff? And this should not happen. So that's one reason to look at the code quality here. And also in the context of this talk, what I want to mention is here that every line you don't write, you don't have to maintain, you don't have to read. And what I've shown here is a lot of not a lot of, just a few features of the Oracle database with superpowers you should use when you have use cases where you can use them, instead of reinventing the wheel and to produce code you have to maintain yourself and to make sure that it works in the future as well. So that's worth considering. Okay, so now it's time to look at some examples again. What do I mean with code quality and rule checking? There are some examples I can show here. And yes, I guess we have time for that. So here I have a small example in SQL Developer, and I call here utility of DB Star Code Cop. That's the check. And he checks this code and says at that position there is something not okay because comparison with null value will not work. In this case, it's really a bug because comparison with equals 0 will never result, will never return true. So this should be probably is. When I do the check again, then this one is fixed. Of course, usually you don't do the comparison directly with is null. Usually you compare two values and say commission is probably equals L commission. And in this case, you have to consider, is L commission always not null? And if it is not null, then it's good. And if it's not null, it's possible that it's not null, then I have either to use NVL or something like that to make sure to handle null values correctly. So even if you have some rule checking here, which find box, and believe me, when I run that stuff from customer side, I find something like this. That's not realistic, not much, but a few places where it is used just because a typo and it's valid syntax. So when I do run check here again, I get another interesting message here which says that I should use Coalesce instead of NVL when the second parameter of NVL is something which is costly. In this case, I can demonstrate that it is really the case that this is costly. See, just querying 14 rows takes 2.9 seconds. And why does it take 2.9 seconds? Because this function, slow function, which is defined here, is called for every single row. So the NVL MGR, then it's called 14 times. And what it does, it returns 0, it returns null, but it also does wait 200 milliseconds, and this results in 2.8 seconds in total, and the rest is a bit overhead of the query. So you see, it really has an impact. So when I use Coalesce instead, to write it the right Coalesce this way, yeah. Then when I run it again, then it's much faster. Why it is faster? Because it's just called once in case of the king where there is no manager and then the slow function is involved. So you see here, there is also some value when you do static code analysis. And this tool, which I've shown you here, is available for free. We have some additional time here. And I guess, yeah, a bit, I can just show that one. Check. And when I look at the result here, I get an information that there is a security vulnerability detected. The SQL injection here is possible. It is possible because this in parameter was used here in this L table, and this L table was used to assign this else equal statement, and this else equal statement was used in the execute immediate, and therefore I got this this message. The solution is here simple. I do an assert, dbms assert simple name, and then it is asserted. Check, and all is good. No SQL injection possible anymore. And the last one, I think I skipped. It's also possible to check for valid I don't know. I always started to show it for valid hints. So you see here the fast hint is not a valid one, and I shouldn't use multiple comments which look like hints, because only the first one is considered. So if I remove that one, then this one is considered, but it is still not good because I have not used the right alias values, and I can change that to E and D, the alias value, and then everything should be good. So a bit shorter version of that demo. And this brings me to the last slide of my presentation, and just to compare data in general with code. From my point of view, data is also more often read than written. And we as developers should ensure, therefore, that we provide consistent data, and makes it easier for the consumers to read that data. So we shouldn't make it the responsibility of the person writing a report to do a data cleansing first, or do a left join for everything, or God forbid a full join for everything, just to be sure to get all data combinations, because in the end it's just cumbersome to use and won't be the fastest solution. So it's also good manner to think about that we are responsible for the code, for the data model we provide, the data we provide, and that we protect it in a way. And when you want to know how that works, you may Google SmartDB and get some further information. With that, I'm ready to take some questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Philip. So people, don't be shy, ask him things. It was great to see all these things, these superpowers for the database that most people probably ignore most of the time. They just think a database is only storing some rows and that's it. So it was a great way to have an overview of what you can actually do in less than 1 hour.
Thanks.
And yeah, I mean, apparently it was extremely clear because nobody has answers. They are maybe all trying to execute codes and following and doing the same things you were showing.
So is this session available in YouTube? Or you answered already the other questions? Or no questions are open, huh? Right?
Yeah, no, there was just a question about recordings and these things where I say most of content will be available afterward. Like look on the ogbemea.com website. Not all the sessions will be there, but most of them, as far as I know. This is something managed by them, not by us directly. But there was not question about the session itself, no.
Okay.
So
you
thank you
still
very
have
much
the
again.
opportunity to ask me, to contact me via LinkedIn, Twitter, or other channels, and ask later.